Well, you've just seen the film Freedom Downtime. At least I hope you've seen the film Freedom Downtime. If not, watch this part later. See the film first, because this won't make much sense to you, or there might be parts that are confusing. We're here with Kevin Mitnick in the year 2003, a few days after his supervised release has come to an end. Kevin, first of all, congratulations.
Hey, thanks a lot. Great. Do I get a handshake?
You get a handshake. You get a lot more than that. I can't imagine what it was like throughout the whole period of time, but let's focus on the last few days, and then we'll move back to what it was like during this whole process. It all came to an end. We're taping this in January of 2003. What were those last few days like? Was it
very well? Before it ended, it was actually very nervous time, because my last time before my supervised release expired, the government issued a warrant without apprising me of it about 30 days before my supervised was to end, and I never knew about it until after I was off. And then once I found out 30 days after it expired, then that's when I went underground. So I was always in this nervous time of whether or not I'm truly going to be off supervised release. Is it really going to come to an end, or is the government going to want to keep me under their thumb? And even today, I'm off supervised release. I called the probation department to ensure that there were no surprises, and it still feels, I feel kind of surreal, like it doesn't, like it's, like I figured I'd feel totally different, but I really don't. And it's kind of funny, I called, I'm on a good rapport with my ex-probation officer. He retired around Halloween, and I called him today saying, hey, I got off probation, and he knew, and he congratulated me, but he warned me, he says, be careful of Ken McGuire, who was the FBI agent that was the case agent in this case, because he's going to still be looking into you. They're still interested in you. In other words, they're not going to ever let up on me, and to be careful.
When you say ex-probation officer, you mean from a previous case, or from this
No,
one?
from this case.
So who was your probation officer until
Well, what happened is my probation officer that supervised me for about 2.5 years retired in Halloween of last year, and then I was appointed a new probation officer for a few months. The guy that was the new appointee, that's not the gentleman that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guy that was kind of supervising me for 2.5 years. The guy that actually, dealt with me from the day I was released for about 2.5 years.
Okay. So now,
which means that the government is never going to leave me alone.
Right. Right. And as is the case with most people, I think, that have been through what you've been through, or something similar.
Bernie, yes.
They're always going to be keeping an eye on these people, and probably to a lot of us too. They'll be keeping an eye on us and monitoring our movements and things like that. But now, the last few days, though, what happened to you back in 1992? Was it 93?
92. You mean when I left?
Your supervised release was about to come to an
end. Well,
I
was targeted by a man who went by the name of Eric Hines. His real name was Justin Tanner Peterson, and Peterson was a co-defendant of another hacker, Kevin Polson. And Peterson was actually more of not a hacker, but more of a criminal. He was using credit card numbers, living, and doing credit card, fraud. And he was busted in Texas, and then in an effort to reduce his sentence, he became an informant in the hopes of getting completely out of the mess he got himself into, or getting a reduced sentence. So the FBI actually had Peterson target me, because this was about 1 year before my supervised release was ending, and the FBI in Los Angeles apparently had told him if he can get Kevin Mitnick, he'd have a real feather in his cap. In other words, if he got me, the big fish, that he would pretty much be, given a very lenient sentence.
So this was back in 1992. The first time your supervised release was coming to an end. It was merely days before it was over. And
30 days. They actually issued the warrant on November 6, 92, and expired on December 7th. And what ended up happening is I stayed at my residence until the expiration date last time. And then 2 days later is when the U.S. Marshals came, and Ken McGuire actually showed up. And my mom was actually, since I left, she was packing up some of the stuff that she could use, because I pretty much abandoned anything that I didn't need. And then about I don't know, 21 days, 30 days later, I found out that they had issued a warrant for my arrest. Then I was afraid that I was going to be the example, because they had put me in solitary confinement for about 8 months under the because of the fear that I could start a nuclear war by whistling into a payphone. Oh. So I was afraid, and so I made my best efforts at staying, trying to evade the FBI.
Why not stay and fight the charges?
Oh, because I would have been fighting them from solitary confinement, and I didn't. And I figured because of the hyperbole, pretty much, which I believe is attributable to one man, John Markoff of the New York Times, because of the hyperbole and sensationalism he created because he wanted to write the Kevin Mitnick book. I was afraid that the government, just as they did last time, that they were going to sensationalize my case and claim that I had done things that not only did I not do, but that were really impossible, and create this whole fear. And thank God it's not happening today, because with this, in this post 9/11 world with Al Qaeda, they would have surely made me into an Al Qaeda terrorist, and because they wanted to play it up. I pretty much, even though I did wrong and I deserved to be punished, that wasn't my argument, but the punishment didn't fit the crime. My civil liberties were disregarded, and I kind of won the scapegoat sweepstakes.
Well, let's go back to the solitary confinement and John Markoff. First of all, what was the period of time that you were in solitary? Why were you in solitary? And how do you feel Markoff ties into that period of time?
The first time I was in solitary confinement was in 1988. December of '88, I was arrested for hacking into Digital Equipment Corporation. And they had their worldwide EasyNet, and myself and another hacker friend at the time had gotten into their network and we made a copy of a program that was an automated hacker utility, because we wanted to see how it worked, how it actually was able to break into these systems, and we also wanted to look at the VMS source code because we wanted to be able to find all the vulnerabilities. Well, what ended up happening is the guy I was doing this with basically ratted me out because we had a falling out, and then I was arrested on December 8th, 1988, and at that time, my first appearance in court, I was really looking forward to getting out of jail to be able to fight this case, because I always assumed that I'd get bail. This was a white-collar case. It was a computer hacking case. It wasn't a murder, rape, robbery. And when I made my first appearance in court, I sat down in court. The attorney that was appointed to my case, I met for with about 5 minutes, and so he had no preparation. And as soon as we go into court, the federal prosecutor says, "Your Honor, not only do we have to detain Mr. Mitnick because he's a grave danger to the security of the United States of America, but we have to ensure that we keep him away from the phone, because if he gets access to a telephone while in custody, even to the prisoners' payphones, that he can somehow start a nuclear war."
Now, they said this back in 1988.
And this is in '88.
Why would they be so afraid of you all the way back then? I remember the press back then. I remember them saying, they coined the phrase dark side hacker, and it was...
Well, actually, that was the result of one man, a guy named John Johnson of the LA Times, wrote this article called "The Dark Side Hacker," or the umbilical cord to his soul, or something. It was this featured article about me that also, before John Markoff spread the myth about hacking into NORAD and doing all these things I hadn't done, and really made me into this public enemy #1. And at that time, I had no dealings with Markoff. That didn't happen until after I was released on that case.
So John Johnson, the reporter from the LA Times, is he the one who coined the phrase dark side hacker? Is he the one that made it?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe he is the one, to the best of my knowledge, is the one that at first called me the dark side hacker. And then I believe that Katie Hafner and John Markoff actually somehow obtained a copy of this, I believe because he's a reporter. He found it on The Wire and basically repeated a lot of the same myths that John Johnson told.
But what I'm trying to get at is, why would this guy from the LA Times in 1988 make you into such a threat? What was it about your case?
What sells papers? It's sensational stories. It's all about making the money, getting ratings, headlines. And what this reporter had done is he wanted to write a sensational story. So he basically took the Kevin Mitnick case, labeled me this dark side hacker, had said things, just as John Markoff had done, that I hacked into NORAD, I don't recall the article off the top of my head because it's been so long, but he basically also had said these things, but I think he said they were allegedly. to the best of my knowledge. I'd have to go back and look at the article. But John Johnson is the first guy that started this whole dark side hacker type image.
Could this have been anybody that this happened to? The dark side
Well, it could be to anybody. I mean, if you get a newspaper journalist that wants to write a compelling story, and they have the power to do that, especially if you're in jail and you can't really speak up and defend yourself. And the reason you can't do that is your attorney, whenever you're arrested on any type of case, be it reckless driving or computer hacking, your attorney is going to tell you to keep your mouth shut. So you're never going to be able to rebut anything that any of these journalists said. You're not going to be able to interview because your attorney is very concerned that you might say something that could injure your chances of an acquittal later.
And you usually wind up plea bargaining to something that you didn't do in the first place.
Well, what was very interesting about the case, imagine this, they put me in solitary confinement because I was such a grave danger to the United States of America, right? And then eventually they want to make a plea agreement, which means not go to trial but settle the case. And so they offered me the agreement. They said, well, if you sign this agreement and admit your guilt and accept 1 year in custody, and I believe that was it, that once you sign that paper, we'll let you out of solitary confinement and we'll put you in the general population. That's part of the deal. So why, if Kevin Mitnick was so dangerous before I signed that paper, why after I sign that paper does that alleviate the threat? And see, what it really amounts to is a lot of federal prosecutors, I think most of them, it's not about truth, justice in the American way. It's all about winning. It's all about winning the case. And what they'll do is they'll use anything at their disposal to use as an ace in the hole or leverage to get you to do what they want. And that's exactly what they did with me, is I signed that plea agreement to get out of solitary confinement because after 8 months of sitting in that small room, you kind of go a little bit stir crazy.
Tell us about that. Now, solitary confinement, 8 months.
8 months. That's pretty much, imagine going into your restroom, your bathroom at your home. Imagine about an 8x10 room. It doesn't have bars. It's not really a cell, but it's a metal door with a sliding thing for food. You're kind of like a caged up animal for 8 months. And if you want to shower, they let you shower like 3 times a week. What you have to do is you have to stick your hands through this slot. They handcuff you. You stick your legs. They can put leg irons on your legs, and then they let you out. They walk you 5 feet down to the shower. You put your arms through there. They take the handcuffs off. You put your legs through the holes. They take the leg irons off. So you're treated like an animal. You can't even walk 5 feet without being handcuffed when you're outside the cell. And you only get out for 1 hour, 5 days a week. And the Bureau of Prisons, it was interesting because John Lippman did some research to find out because he thought it was absurd.
The author of The Fugitive Game.
In The Fugitive Game, correct. And according to the Bureau of Prisons, they have no record of me being in solitary.
What about the piece of paper you signed? Is there a record of that piece of paper?
Well, it's a plea agreement. A plea agreement that I agreed to settle the case. And then, after I settled the case, as one of the beneficial one of the points that would benefit me is I'd get released into the general population. Then I ended up going to Lompoc Federal Prison Camp for 4 months, and then I was released.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing because when we talked to John Markoff in the film, he seemed to be unaware that you were even in solitary confinement, which I found to be amazing.
I think he is aware of it. He has to be very careful because his whole reputation's on the line here, and he knows in his heart he has done wrong. He knows in his heart that he didn't report the facts. And he knows in his heart what his real motive is to write the Kevin Mitnick book. I believe this to be true because John Lippman, who would have no reason to lie to me, told me he had met John Markoff for lunch in San Francisco, and he confided to John Lippman that he wanted to do the Kevin Mitnick book. And then he offered John Lippman the opportunity to do an article in Playboy regarding me. And Markoff uses that as I was never interested in Mitnick. I gave John Lippman the opportunity to write this article in Playboy, but the reason Markoff couldn't do it, there was apparently some sort of conflict of interest. So there was another reason. It's not that he just didn't want to. There was a reason why he could not. And what basically happened is imagine one day picking up a paper like the New York Times and reading a story about yourself. That basically, and they use this, a very unbecoming picture, and you're on the front page above the fold, and it's as fact that you had done things that not only you did not do, but never have occurred. You know, like I was accused of computer hacking related stuff. What happens if some average guy on the street is accused of being a child molester or something like that? Can you imagine the irreparable harm that a journalist, an unethical journalist, can cause? And see, Markoff, when he first wrote his article that ended up being the story ran on Independence Day of 1994, at that time I was a fugitive. And a fugitive in the sense that I was evading arrest on this arrest warrant that I found out about later, about the supervised release. Well, John Markoff knew that I wasn't going to come and rebut his article because I'd have to turn myself in. And he was banking on the fact that I wouldn't turn myself in to rebut it. And so I was kind of, defenseless. I couldn't sit there and, and sue him for libel or sue the New York Times.
But Markoff wrote the article, true, but he didn't put it on the front page.
No, somebody at the New York Times did. It didn't matter where it was. What mattered is
being on the front page does make a big difference, especially about the fold, and everybody can see your picture.
Yeah, I don't know what influence John Markoff had at the New York Times, but it did end up on the front page. I don't know if he's part of that decision-making process or not, but all I do know is the man intentionally wrote lies and libeled me with the intention of raising public interest, in my case, maybe influencing the Department of Justice to make an example out of me so he could write a book about it.
And 2 books were written. Cyberpunk came out in...
Well, Cyberpunk was before that. That was after my first case. And how... and it kind of a lot of the stories in the first chapter of the, in case the people watching this don't know, I co-wrote a book called The Art of Deception, which is about social engineering tactics and how to
prevent that book in the last year.
Yes, it was released on October 4th of 2002.
Okay.
And in the first chapter was kind of like a general overview of Kevin's story, because I wanted to get the facts out about a little bit of what happened in my case, and a lot of it was about a little bit of my background, a lot about how this myth of Kevin Mitnick was created, and the man that I hold responsible. Actually, two. It's really John Markoff and John Johnson. So what happened is the publisher loved the idea of having, because everyone wants to know Kevin's side of the story. So the publisher or the editor, senior editor that I was dealing with, was very interested and thought it was a great thing to have this story that would segue into the book, which is really about social engineering. And at the last moment, before they're going to print, I get a call from John Wiley & Sons telling me that they're not going to include that chapter. Well, first of all, they called me saying they wanted to rewrite the chapter and and edit it. So they sent me an edited piece, and it didn't reflect my voice at all. Nothing, all the atrocious things that had happened to me and the injustices were basically removed from the chapter. I said, no way. I said, if it's either all or nothing. So what they did is, despite my request, they just they basically edited my first chapter and called and they labeled it the preface, and didn't include, really what I wanted to express. What happened is John Wiley & Sons released about 300 to 400 galley copies of the book, to their book buyers, to the media, as part of their publicity campaign. And what ended up is they actually had in that first galley the first chapter. And what happened recently, I was contacted by you, as a matter of fact, because you got an email that somehow ended up on Yahoo somewhere. And now, fortunately, my voice or my side of the story has pretty much been published, but only in certain areas on the World Wide Web. So,
what kind of reaction did you get when the story did break?
Well, I don't know if the average person on the street that is aware of my case actually read it, but for the people that did, which is a lot of been fans and supporters and people that have been following this case, it was a very positive response, and I'm glad that it got out. I couldn't have any part of it, because I wrote that work for Wiley, but I'm actually glad that the word got out. I'm very disappointed that it couldn't have ended up in the actual book itself, because it was important for me to express my side of the story, and it was very general, though.
That's where I got my first look at it, was on the internet, and by seeing what you had to say. I admit it didn't really fit in with the rest of the book in the way that you telling stories about social engineering and how to protect your company, but I think it was very important to hear what you had to say. And yeah, I can understand why certain people would be very upset seeing you accusing them of things, but for God's sake, for the last 8 years, you know, you've been prevented from speaking, from doing lots of things. And obviously you have a side. In fact, to this day, you're still not really allowed to tell your story. Is that right?
Well, I'm allowed to tell it. I just can't profit from it. As part of the agreement I had to sign to get out of jail, or I've had to go through a trial, then the government, that's a whole other story. I was basically told if I make the government prove their case, what they're going to do is take me to another federal jurisdiction and indict me and put me through a revolving door of trials. So I ended up, spending time in custody for as long as they want, or I signed the agreement. And as part of that agreement, I had to sign what they call an assignment agreement for a period of 7 years after I'm off probation or supervised release, basically saying I can't profit off telling, writing an autobiography, doing a newspaper article, magazine article, motion picture, movie of the week, or any commercial venture involving the Kevin Mitnick story. So basically what the government's doing is they're chilling my free speech by disadvantaging me from being able to profit off the time and energy it would take to get this out into a book or into a movie format.
I remember back in 1995, I believe it was David Schindler who said what you said here, that he would take you to virtually every jurisdiction and charge you for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
And was that part of that particular threat, that if you didn't agree to this particular thing?
Well, I'd agreed to the whole thing, and this was part of the package. Mm-hmm. I agreed to this assignment agreement. Kevin Poulsen actually they wanted it for life, but I negotiated it down to 7 years, which actually ended up being 10, because it was after my supervised release expires is when the 7-year timer starts. Mm-hmm. Kevin Poulsen can't do it for life. And what their argument is, well, we can't have criminals profiting from their crime. But I don't look at it like that, because I think our United States Constitution, what's the First Amendment? Freedom of assembly, freedom of press, freedom of speech. The First Amendment should trump everything else. And what they're doing is they're weighing a public policy. They don't want people that have committed a crime to somehow profit indirectly from that. But anytime the government disadvantages anyone physically or economically not exercising that freedom of speech, they're actually chilling that person's free speech, and I believe it's unconstitutional. So I am actually going to try to find an attorney to examine these issues. I'd like to go to the EFF, but they've never been any help to me. I doubt they would even look into the matter. But it's really an interesting issue, because every court to look at this issue, and we're talking about people that have been kidnappers and have murdered people, Henry Hill, Mafia, Frank Keenan kidnapped Frank Sinatra's kid. These guys have prevailed when they went up and litigated this, and they've won on First Amendment grounds. And so for me, because I do want to tell my story, and I've been, people have approached me, even actors like Kevin Spacey were interested in doing my story, and I'm being prevented from doing it because of this assignment agreement.
You mentioned the EFF hasn't been helpful. How about the ACLU? A lot of people have asked.
No, the ACLU, they tend not to get involved in any criminal cases. I don't know if they would get involved in a civil matter that involves me at this point in time. But it's an interesting issue, because I could understand, if you go kill somebody, you don't want people to write a story about it, and you don't want Jeffrey Dahmer to be able to write the Jeffrey Dahmer book if he was alive. You could understand that, but then again, do you want people that advocate racism like the KKK? Do you want those people out advocating their hatred? And they still can do it, because why? We have the First Amendment in this country. Mm-hmm. So even if people believe it's not right, or it's despicable, or it doesn't meet public policy, it really should not matter. It really goes to our freedom of speech.
Do you see yourself as a criminal?
In the definition, of the legal definition, yes, because there's a law and I broke it. Okay, the crimes that we're charged with, and that I pled to, I believe I committed some of them, but I didn't commit others. And the ones that I don't believe I'm guilty of is computer fraud and wire fraud. But I do believe I'm guilty for possessing access devices and intercepting electronic communications. And if you're interested in that theory, I can go into it. But I don't believe, like, in a true, I mean, in a legal sense, yes. If you commit a crime, you're a criminal. So, like, if there's a law against running red lights, that you have to stop at a red light, and you run through that red light, you also broke the law. So, if running through the red light is defined as a crime, you're a criminal, right? So, do I believe that the type of criminal I am is analogous to a rapist, murderer, robber, terrorist? No, I think there's degrees
but those
of
were the
criminality.
people you were locked up with.
Yeah,
those kind of people.
I believe there are degrees of criminality for something that's very trivial to something that's very serious. And what the government did in my case, in the Kevin Mitnick case, is they treated me as if I was an industrial spy. I was punished based on causing millions of dollars of loss that were never caused. What the government did, and it gets a little bit technical, but I'll be happy to explain it to you, is if you're convicted of a fraud or theft-related offense, right? They have a thing called the Federal Sentencing Guidelines. It's like this grid, and you look at the person's criminal history, and you look at their offense, and you come up with a number of months they serve in prison. Well, under the sentencing guidelines, when you commit a fraud or a theft, the biggest part of your sentence is based on the loss to the victim. Well, if I steal this Red Bull can from you, you no longer have it. So your loss is, a couple bucks.
I've got
right?
my own, yes, but...
You have your own, that's good. But when the underlying property, in this case, was information, it was source code, because I wanted to look at the source code to spot vulnerabilities that would make me better at being able to circumvent security. When you take a copy of that, do you deprive the owner I'm sorry, let me go back. How the theft and fraud guidelines work is you're punished based on the value of the property taken, damaged, or destroyed.
As if you took the only copy.
Right. So the value of this can of Red Bull is maybe a couple bucks. Now, in the case that I made a copy of source code so I could look at it, moved it over to USC or moved it over to university so I could examine it with the least likelihood of being detected, is the prosecutors use the theory as if in a regular tangible theft case that the loss to the victims were the value of the source code. So they simply called up the victims or wrote them a letter and said, provide us a letter that summarizes the value of the source code. So all these companies provided their R&D investments. So you had Sun Microsystems saying, well, we wrote Solaris, it cost us over $80 million to develop. Nokia, with their cell phone, cost them over $131 million to develop the Nokia phone. And they're basically saying that they basically turned this theory on its head, and I was punished as if I deprived these companies of their software, as if I took it and destroyed their copy.
And is it not true that in the case of Solaris source code, that's now available for free?
Yeah. I wonder if they could argue, the prosecutors today, since they're pretty witty, they would probably say, well, the only reason Solaris went open source is because of Mitnick. He looked at it, so it was no longer a secret. You know what I'm saying? That's probably the position they would take. But and the whole idea with the theft and fraud, the wire fraud and computer fraud, I had to plead guilty to wire fraud and computer fraud. And to be convicted of a fraud, the Supreme Court has ruled there has to be a deprivation of money or property. And let's go back into this tangible, non-tangible thing. If I take this can from you, you no longer have it. It's tangible. I take it, you no longer have it. When it comes to information, like software or source code, if I look at it, or if I make a copy of it, the question is, did I deprive you of it? Surely I breached the confidentiality and I snooped on something that I wasn't supposed to look at. And there was one case, because I used to do all this legal research when I was in jail, this one case involving a guy named Richard Sabinski. He was an IRS agent on the East Coast. And what he did is he used IRS computers to get people's tax return information. And he was caught, I guess because they audit. And he went to trial. He was basically charged with wire fraud and computer fraud, the same statutes that I was charged with. And he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 6 months in prison, okay, a lot less than 5 years. And then he appealed it, basically saying, using the argument, by looking at this information and by making a copy of it, I didn't deprive anybody of the value. I didn't deprive them of this property. So he took it all the way up to the appellate court. So it's the first court in U.S. history to look at the issue. What line do you have to cross before there's a deprivation of their property interest in the information? And the court had ruled that the government would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person who looked at the information would have had the intent to use it or disclose it to the detriment of the owner. And in my case, the government never alleged, and they fully were aware that I wasn't intending to use or disclose that information. And that's what I wanted to go to trial on. Saying, yeah, I got in, I looked at the information, but I had no malicious intent to use it or disclose it, so hence I'm not guilty of fraud, because I didn't deprive Motorola, Nokia, Fujitsu, NEC of their property interest. Yes, I trespassed and I snooped, but it didn't amount to fraud. And the government had told my attorney, if I take them to test on their case, they're just going to move me through jurisdiction to jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So that's why I really believe that under federal law, I wasn't guilty of fraud, but of other federal crimes.
Do you think you would have won a trial, though, had you taken it to trial?
Not in the federal district court, because this judge hated me. This judge I had dealt with on my first case. She really bought into the myth of Kevin Mitnick that I could, give Mitnick duct tape and a 9-volt battery, and he could cause a nuclear strike. I believe I would have had a good chance in the appellate court, but this was another scary thing. Is anytime you go to the appellate court, you're rolling the dice. What happens is you draw 3 judges, as you're well aware, DCSS, right? And those 3 judges might not necessarily agree with the 3 judges in the First Circuit, where Sabinski was. And then if they disagree, then certainly what would have happened if I took it to trial and lost, this judge would have hammered me and maybe given me 15 or 20 years to make me the biggest example in the world. And then I would have been praying that these 3 judges agree with this other federal appellate court, and if they didn't, I would have been screwed. So I didn't take the chance. I basically signed and got out.
You've learned so much about the justice system since 1988.
Yeah.
What surprises you the most about it? I mean, is it disillusioning to know that as much as you do?
It's all about who's winning. That's what the game is. Mm-hmm. You have 2 attorneys. You have a defense attorney and prosecutor. The prosecutors have all the resources because they have unlimited budget.
So it's all about money then? It's
all about money. It's all about who has the money. It's not about justice. It's about economics, and it's about winning at all costs. That's what the federal justice system is about. But then again, it's not been my argument. It hasn't been my argument that I didn't do anything wrong and I didn't deserve to be punished. My argument was what I really did was trivial in a sense. I caused some loss, nowhere near the losses the government has accused me of. And it certainly didn't give the federal judiciary or the federal prosecutors the right to disregard my constitutional rights. I sat in prison for 4 long years awaiting trial. Okay, I'm not presumed to be an innocent man sitting in prison for 4.5 years. I'm the only one in U.S. history that was held without a bail hearing. Theodore Kaczynski, Unabomber, Timothy McVeigh, Oklahoma City, these guys, Malvo and Muhammad or whatever, Washington, D.C. snipers, Robert Hansen, Aldrich Ames, all these guys, Lee Ho Win in Los Alamos.
They didn't get bail, but they got a bail hearing.
They didn't get bail, but they got the hearing. And the reason you want the hearing, why it's so valuable, is the test is there any condition or combination of conditions that will reasonably assure that you'll appear? That's the test. Because I was a fugitive, it would have been a hard way to go. But the reason you want the hearing is you have a right to testify, to proffer evidence, to have representation by counsel, to hear the government side of the case. And then what happens is you could appeal that decision of the lower court because they look at the hearing and they see it on paper in the transcripts. Well, if you never have the hearing, you also don't have the right to appeal a hearing that never occurred. And constitutionally, before the government could deprive you of your freedom, you have a right to a hearing, period.
What do you think would have been a fair sentence for someone who committed the crimes that you committed? Do you think prison is even something that should be considered?
Yeah, that's kind of self-serving type of question. What I really think the government should have done is really figured, or the victims, they should have figured out the real losses that I caused. the real dollar amount and not exaggerated and blown it all out of proportion. And then based on whatever the federal law was at that time, like whatever the punishment was for that particular number, that would have been acceptable to me. I'd have no complaints because, hey, I did something wrong and I got caught, and that was the consequence. Do I think the laws nowadays, where they're trying to put hackers away for life, I think it's absolutely absurd.
Well, let's fast forward to the present day,
Yeah.
post 9/11. If you had been in the situation that you were in back then.
Yeah, well, the government actually, the DOJ, if you go into Google or you go into LexisNexis or Westlaw, the publicity PR people in the DOJ were calling me a computer terrorist, and they were using that derogatory term in a very loose sense, and and calling me, labeling me as a computer terrorist was, I just couldn't believe it. I've never crashed a computer system. I never destroyed data. I never profited from selling stolen information or anything like that. I never have tried to influence the government into a course of action based on some sort of threat. And yet I'm called a computer terrorist. What happens if that happened today? I would have been in Guantanamo Bay. In Cuba.
Well, okay, by that logic though, what damage did you cause? Because you said you did cause some damage. If you never did any of those things, where's the damage?
Well, the damage is probably in them investigating the security incident, and like when you hack into a box, they don't know what your intent was, the victim, so to speak. So they probably have to reinstall the OS, change passwords, reinstall the operating system, reinstall the apps. That takes time. Time equates to money. I talked to this guy named Sean Nunley, who we're friends now, but he worked at Novell. He's the guy that I called up on the telephone and was able to trick into creating me an account on their terminal server. Because I was already behind the Novell firewall because I had a vulnerability in SMTP, but I still wanted a California dial-in. So I tracked him down at his home in Tracy, called him up, gave him a good story. He created the account. What I did is I called his voicemail and I left the password that I wanted, and he always saved the message. Then when they found out that I was the hacker, they sent this, they tape recorded the voice, and they gave it to the FBI, and they never heard anything for like 6 months. 6 months later, Sean gets a call, and it's Kathleen Carson in the LA office. She goes, "I just played the tape, and I know who it is." And he goes, "What do you mean you know who it is?" She goes, "I don't recognize his voice right off the bat. That's Kevin Mitnick." Because it was, and this guy couldn't believe it. They just sat on it for 6 months. But so, in any event, he told me that at Novell, they were rebuilding their boxes. Like every system that I compromised, they did rebuild the box from scratch. So they were spending a lot of time and money because they didn't know what I was going to do. And they didn't know whether I put in some piece of malicious code. So to cover themselves, people were spending an inordinate amount of time on it. So he said, it cost them a lot of money, he said. So that's what I'm really going on. So I'm sure I cost them some damage, but nothing was intentional. I didn't ever profit from this, and I didn't crash destroy their data. And I'm sorry for causing them the damage. That wasn't my intent. When I was doing it, what I thought that they found out about it was just a matter of changing some passwords. I had no idea that they would be having to rebuild their systems. I wasn't even thinking that they'd have to do something like that.
What motivated you in the first place?
Intellectual challenge, learning how things work. I wanted to become the best at circumventing security, right? There's two ways of doing it. You could either find security holes in closed proprietary systems by reverse engineering, which takes a lot of time. So I kind of wanted the Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes are the source code. You look at the source code, you can look for buffer overflows, you can look for commented code where a security problem was fixed, and then work it backwards to go, oh, they're fixing it here, so what was the vulnerability? And then I'd become very adept at being able to circumvent security, and that's all I wanted to do, was to be like the best lock picker, but in the sense of that, and also learn how these systems worked. I like taking things apart and figuring out the inner workings of it and playing with the technology. To me, it was a game. I never meant anybody any harm by it, and it was exploratory. To me, cyberspace, beginning with the ARPANET, was all about exploring cyberspace. and go and sneaking into things you weren't supposed to be into, kind of for the thrill of it, for the fun of it, and doing cool things and being a kind of a prankster and having fun with it.
Wasn't that more or less accepted back in the early days?
Oh yeah, like what I was doing, and I was doing it openly. I was, my teachers never told me don't do it. My parents didn't tell me don't do it. It was, they weren't very computer knowledgeable anyway. But back then it was like, if you're a hacker, you were cool. You were given kudos, and nobody looked at it as today as like, oh, now you're the master criminal. So I started before there were even laws against this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's a long road you've been on from the early days to now, and I mean, you must have seen all kinds of changes, especially now that you're finally back on the internet for the first time since you were a fugitive.
Right.
What kind of changes have you noticed, apart from the attitude change and the paranoia?
Pop-up windows.
Pop-up
windows. And
that's what it's all about.
And spam.
Uh-huh.
No, I think the internet is, when I was busted in February '95, the internet was, I was using Mosaic 1.0. I was browsing JPL to look at pictures of Mars. Pretty much. Email. There was Gopher, there was Veronica, there was Archie. Back in those days, there was no commercialism on the internet. In fact, I think according to the charter of NSFNet, you couldn't do any commercial transactions or profit from using the internet, and the explosion, the .com, the commercialization of the internet, all happened when I was locked away as a presumed innocent man for 4.5 years.
So it must be like a totally different thing now, seeing
Yeah,
this.
and unfortunately I haven't had time to really sit down and play with it at all, but it's really nothing new to me, to be honest with you. I had a radio show in Los Angeles on KFI, and my show was about demystifying the internet. So what I would do is people would access the internet, and I'd be sitting behind them, and I'd be learning about the net where I couldn't type, but where they would actually be using the internet, or they'd print out stuff for me. So it's not like it's a big mystery, but it's nice not to have to call somebody and say, hey, check my email.
To actually touch the button.
You used to check my email a couple times a while ago as a favor.
Wading through the spam to find the one message
one message we're looking for, yeah.
Now, you've engaged in a lot of projects since your release in 2000, and they all involve some kind of a challenge, because obviously to do a radio show on KFI, you needed to get access to what was going on in the net. You needed somebody to be able to check things for you. You wrote a book, which, considering it was about social engineering, it was about things that involved technology, yet you weren't able to use the internet.
Right, in fact, it was the first time I was able to use a computer was back in January of 2002. I was going to ask the probation officer for not a laptop, but for a word processor, right? So I can work on writing the book with my co-author. Because I also have to be, what am I going to do it on a yellow pad? So they surprised me, and my probation officer gave me permission to get a laptop or a desktop computer as long as I do not connect to the internet. So
and that must have been hard, because so many devices today connect to the internet by default, so you don't even know you're connecting to the internet.
Yeah, but at first he wouldn't even let me get a modem. Then I convinced him. I said, listen, my co-author and I need to trade files, and the way we can only do it is by modem. So he said, okay, and I told him, and I bought the laptop, it had a built-in modem. You know how they are, it's not like the old days where you had to get a modem card. Right. Or a PCMCIA card.
And these days you have built-in wireless cards.
Yes.
So you could instantly...
Actually, the laptop I had gotten did not have a wireless card. The one I have now does.
You also testified before Congress.
Testified before Congress. That was fun. You were there.
I was there.
Yeah. And
we were backstage with Joe Lieberman before he was the vice presidential candidate in 2000.
Do you remember when he told me I should become an attorney, or was it Thompson? They were joking around. I was explaining my case, and one of them said, "You should really become a lawyer, Mr. Mitnick."
That might have been Thompson, but I'm sure they both think along the same lines.
So then I said, well, there's a little problem with a felony conviction. I said, maybe you guys can help me out with a pardon. And then I was joking around with the media, and basically my first email will be to Lieberman asking him, hey, when he gets into office, consider a pardon.
They were so nice to you then.
They were nice guys.
And,
I liked them.
You gave them all kinds of information in front of that subcommittee about security and social engineering and that kind of thing. They seemed really interested, and perhaps they were. But that doesn't seem to translate in today's legislation and the way people are being prosecuted and the overall paranoid feeling that you get in society?
See, to the government, I'm still, I'm still hated and discriminated against, and I mean, even recently, I went to join this group called the ISSA, which is the Information Security Systems Association. I think that's the name of it. And I went to a couple meetings, and then I filled in. And then on the second meeting, one of the guys confided in me there, that actually is part of their group, that they're going to try to ask me to leave. That I should sign up to become a member. So I signed up online the day my probation expired. And they actually sent me an email granting me membership and giving me a password to the website. So now they're trying to manipulate the situation, claiming, well, they never did enroll me. It was a mistake, and the system did it, automated. But it doesn't do it automated in 48 hours.
I remember you running into a similar situation.
So what they're trying to do, but the bottom line is here, even though I made a mistake, I paid my debt to society, I completed my probation, I've assisted the U.S. government and businesses, it's still people in the security industry are just they just won't forget, they just won't let it be, they won't let it go, and it's a constant issue. I mean, one of these guys confided me, there's people here that hate you, and I'm being discriminated against, and it's like an uphill battle still. Because I'm dealing with these guys in suits that hacked when they were in the universities and hacked when they were in high school, but now they have to, turn their image around like, hey, I don't condone this type of stuff. If you've done this before, you're the evilest person on earth. I mean, I look at guys like, I don't want to mention his name. One guy that runs the most successful information security company that started it. Okay. And it's on the stock. It's on, I believe, it's being traded. It's the only public one.
People can find out on their own.
Right. I used to trade vulnerabilities with this guy back, in the mid '80s, early '90s. So, and to this day, the guy doesn't hire hackers at his company, right? See, it's all about image. It's all, to sum it up, it's all bullshit.
But, well, the same thing happened to you years ago, I think a digital conference.
Oh yeah, where they banned me from going to DECUS.
And what happened then?
Basically, I signed up for the conference. My company that I was working for sent me there, and they realized I was there, and the powers to be tracked me down, and they actually booted me out from that conference.
We live in a different world today with the events of 9/11 and total information awareness, the Patriot Act. What is it that frightens you the most about all this?
Well, I love a bumper sticker that I recently saw. It said something to the effect is, I love my country, but it's the government I'm afraid of. And that kind of is my sentiment exactly. I think in this post 9/11 world that our government, the people in the DOJ, are really exploiting this tragedy to get more power, under the pretense that it's to fight terrorism. And they're trying to get a lot of power to surveil United States citizens with very little or no judicial review. And it's concerning to me, because each and every time we as Americans, in trying to achieve better security because of the fear of terrorism, each and every time we give up a civil liberty, we'll never get it back. And our forefathers have fought and died in wars back, when we came from England, so to speak, to fight for these rights. And it just amazes me on a day-by-day basis of how easily people are willing to give up those rights in exchange for a little bit of security. And that's what really causes me some reflection. And then I think about why, when the government is asking for additional power, why don't they ask for that additional power for a very limited period of time? They say, well, when the fight for against terrorism is going to go on indefinitely. It's never going to be over. Just like the war on drugs, it's still going on today. It's never going to be over. So it really concerns me about how easily people are willing to give up these rights.
Well, it's because of fear, because people are afraid.
So security. They want security.
They're willing to give up rights because they're afraid of, well,
they're willing to give up their privacy in exchange for feeling more secure. But once you give up those privacy rights, you will never, ever get them back. Period.
Do you see a parallel between the fear that people have of the unknown, which makes them give up all their civil liberties, and the fear that's instilled in people by the media against people like you?
Yeah, I do see a parallel. For the reason that Kevin Mitnick became the cause célèbre and the cyber boogeyman was really as a result of John Markoff's reporting, John Johnson's reporting, and the Department of Justice. They needed a cyber boogeyman to put the fear in the hearts of the American people that there's dangerous people out there and we need to protect society against these people. And the term hacker, which I believed and still believe is an honorable term, has turned to be a derogatory term. The word hacker now means a guy with a computer that's a criminal. And that's the farthest, that is not my definition. It's the furthest thing from my mind. A hacker is somebody that enjoys the intellectual challenge, likes to take things apart, likes to stretch technology and do things that it wasn't originally intended to do. And they like figuring their way around obstacles. One of the ways that I used to figure a way around obstacles was circumventing security. It was a challenge and it was an exploration type hobby to me. But in today's world, the word, there's cracker, there's hacker, there's white hat, there's black hat. And there's no set definition of these terms. So in one, and I had a discussion with a Wired reporter who actually was able to, they wanted to use, when they talked about Kevin Mitnick, the word cracker. And the word cracker was a word that drew a strong inference that I was malicious. And malicious is intentionally trying to cause harm, and I was never that type of hacker. So I made it a point to argue this fact, so now when you read stories on Wired Online about me, you don't see them refer to me as a cracker.
Well, cracker is a fairly new term that was put forth by people that wanted to defend the word hacker. Cracker used to mean code cracker.
Well, they didn't want people like Kevin Mitnick and other hackers to be in the same group as them. They wanted to be distinguished because they thought that people like me brought, made the word hacker a derogatory term. I didn't do it. So it was the mainstream media that did it.
They made a new derogatory term.
Right.
But it has no more definition, and that's what I think is the problem with it, is that there's no definition to the word cracker, and you don't know anything about what the person is.
Well, it's a malicious hacker. But what's malicious?
What does that mean?
It's malicious by, if you look at something you're not supposed to, or you get into somewhere you're not supposed to be, or is it where you write a worm, like a SQL worm, that takes down the internet? What is the line that you have to cross?
And
it's not well defined.
There are words to describe people who do malicious things, correct?
Right. There's other words like vandals, like what Markoff called me, labeled me in his articles was a computer vandal that has run amok. When I never vandalized anything in my life, physical or electronically.
What do you think of the state of the hacker world today?
Well, it's interesting. It's like the hackers that I used to associate with or who I had knowledge of in the past have now taken their interest in exploring computer networks and circumventing security and have went to the commercial sector and are now basically hacking and getting paid for it, finding security vulnerabilities, doing security assessments, and using their skills in a very narrow area of penetration testing. And I see a lot of people that I knew about in those days doing that type of work because it's obviously too risky, and now hacking, like I think of the 1960s where smoking pot was cool in the hippie era, and now then they have that war on drugs where if you get caught with pot, like in the state of Nevada, you're going to prison for a long time. Here it's a ticket in California. But same thing in the hacking thing. In the beginning, when I started in the late 70s, it was a cool thing. It was a harmless exploration. It was you were kind of a snoop, getting in where you weren't supposed to be, but it wasn't that much of a big deal. In today's world, it's like they equate a hacker to a terrorist.
They do. But
They
just
do.
like,
The
just like
mainstream.
today's pot smokers still think that's cool. Today's hackers still think hacking is cool.
Yeah, there's yeah, I believe they do. It's kind of interesting because there's a lot of hypocrisy. When I went to the RSA security conference last year, and Ira Winkler, who I dislike, was doing a talk, and he brought me up as the example. So I stood up. I said, "Hey, don't talk about me." You know,
Did he know you were in the
no,
audience?
no, he didn't know I was there, right? So I must have shocked him a little bit. And so then he tried to engage me to comment, and I didn't want anything to do with him. He wrote a book, and his first chapter was just dissing me when I never even spoke to the man. You know, so I don't like anyone that makes judgment calls with just one side of the story, right? So Winkler, forgot what the point I was going to make now.
Well, we're talking about the hacker world.
Oh yeah. So after that, after this thing with Winkler happened, I had a lot of people that didn't even know I was there. Now they knew what I looked like. You know, it got a lot of attention, and they came up to me, and a lot of them said, "Hey, man, we're really sorry. You got shafted. You were railroaded." You know, because to tell you the truth, I used to, when I was in the university, when I was in college, I used to hack too. And these are guys coming up to me that have badges that they're with big, security organizations like Red Siren and ISS and these recognized security firms, and these are the guys that would decree hacking. If you're a hacker, you're a bad guy. And they used to do it themselves. A great number of them used to be involved, in the younger years, as dabbling in a little bit of unauthorized activity.
And they remember those years.
And they remember those years. Of course, the people that told me this, and there were numerous of them, they never told me in front of anybody else.
Of course.
They went up to me privately. Yeah.
They're afraid of being labeled, outed as
just
a hacker.
like a lot of these firms, like At Stake, ISS. These are the guys, that I've heard have engaged in a little bit of questionable activity, right? Have crossed the line themselves, yet, we'd never hire a hacker, like with the fiber optic thing. I thought it was ridiculous. It's all about image. It's all...
What kind of a message would you send to today's hackers, the kids that are just starting out, that are curious, that see you as kind of a role model?
Well, I don't want them to end up in my shoes and go through the trial and tribulations. And also, back in my day, it was the cool thing to do. In today's world, it's really looked at as a violation of another person's property rights. So, by hacking into systems that aren't yours. So, in today's world, you can set up your own network at home. You can set up a network with a group of people and try to hack into each other's systems and not go into like corporations or where you're not supposed to be. Otherwise, you might end up as the new example. You don't want to be the new example.
But they've moved the line a bit. They've made it so that if you even try and reverse engineer a program, you're breaking a law now. You can go to prison for that.
Oh, the DMCA.
Violating the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
It's ridiculous.
So it's not
the
just,
DMCA
it's not just hacking into
we could
someone else's
go on for
computer.
that for an hour. The DMCA is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's all about money. Money gets the lobbying power.
You can commit a crime on your own computer without connecting to anything, just by figuring out another computer program.
Well, if you do so, don't tell anybody. You know what am I going to say? I mean, do I think it's wrong to find vulnerabilities in security mechanisms that protect copyrighted materials? No. Do I think the law is bullshit? Yes. Would I openly violate that law? No. Would I encourage anybody to violate it? No. It's kind of like, is it illegal to listen to cellular phone calls on scanners? Yes. Do people do it all the time? Yes. Do people do it in the presence of the FBI? No.
How would you fight the ridiculous laws? Not you personally, but how, in general, should the hacker community, should the population at large
the problem is,
fight these things?
It's very difficult to fight because it takes money. I mean, the people, the RIAA, the MPAA, they have a lot of money backing them. The people that are interested in defeating security for the intellectual challenge do not have a lot of money, and they're more of the everyday wage earner. Okay, but at least back in my day. So it's who has the most money is going to win. who's going to have the money to influence congressmen and women and senators?
Well,
it's the people with the money.
We're never going to have as much money as the opposition, but should we give up because of that?
No, I don't believe in giving up. You should get the word out to the population about the pros and cons, and influence people to make up their own mind based on the arguments.
That's one thing that I think we can look to the Free Kevin movement as getting the word out.
Yeah,
I thought it was amazing how the word spread, how everybody was saying Free Kevin, and I think that kind of added to future movements such as the Free Dimitri movement and various other
I
things.
actually picketed for Dimitri down here in Santa Monica. It's funny, my girlfriend and I were in Las Vegas, and on her Jeep Cherokee, she has a Free Kevin bumper sticker, and we're driving in Vegas. This is about a week or two ago, and then someone shouts out, "He's already free!" Out of the car. It's kind of cool because you never figure that people are really going to know.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people stop my grandmother. They go, "Who's Kevin?"
And so many people do know. So many people have found out, people you wouldn't expect,
Right.
gas station attendants and, people's fathers-in-law.
And I owe a lot of gratitude, to you personally and to the members of 2600 for getting the word out. Because if people didn't speak their mind to their opinion of what was happening to me and about my civil rights being disregarded, about the media and about the federal prosecutors, creating a character of Kevin Mitnick, of something that I never really could do, like break into NORAD or start a nuclear war, is they would have basically been able to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, and who knows, I might not even be here today talking to you. I might have been the computer terrorist, or Miramax, when they were making that atrocious movie that was going to cast me in this light as the Hannibal Lecter of computers, when it was simply a fabricated script loosely based on Markov's writings.
And here we are 5 years later. That film still has not seen the light of day in this country. It's out in Europe, but I don't think it's ever going to.
And I get email all the time saying, "I love the film. You were great." And
are you sure they're not talking about this film?
No, they're talking about Takedown, right? They're talking about Takedown, and it's not true. It's not the true story. And they're like they're now a fan because they saw this movie that doesn't depict the real Kevin Mitnick.
Do you get any mail about Freedom Downtime?
No, it's all about, they call it Cybertrack but don't forget, I haven't been using email for that long.
That's true.
What's the date, the 25th? So we're talking about 4 whole days?
Yeah. But what did you think of Freedom Downtime?
Oh, I thought it was great.
Yeah. Anything that we got wrong? Anything that needs to be expanded upon?
Well, no, I think it's always good to get information. I thought it could have been just a tad bit shorter. And like, for instance, like you had a scene in there where you're removing gum out of the car.
That was an important scene.
Wow. That's a very valuable scene. It was funny.
It symbolized the difficulty that we were having telling the story because it stuck to the surface of the car, and it was just a mess.
Maybe I just didn't get it, but I thought it was very well done, and it's the best. It's the best film that really goes out into the community and really discusses the important issues. And see, what I think the Free Kevin movement is about, it's not just about me, it's about, we don't want this to happen again. We don't want the government or business to use their powers to unfairly make an example out of somebody for something they did not do, because they're trying to advance their own agenda. John Markoff was trying to advance the agenda of writing the Kevin Mitnick book so he can profit, which he did, and he made multi-million dollars. The government's agenda was trying to get more power and more laws passed that the DOJ could enforce. The prosecutor's agenda and their overzealousness in my prosecution was to advance in their own careers. In fact, right after I pled guilty, Christopher Painter went on to be the deputy chief of CSIPS, the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section, and David Schindler went into private practice right after the Kevin Mitnick case was done, because they wanted to advance in their own careers. The FBI wanted to basically send a message: if you make fools out of us, we're going to get you.
One thing a lot of people ask about with regards to the film Freedom Downtime is what was going on inside the prison when we were filming you from the mobile station across the street. Now, you've told me this story of what was actually happening inside while you were banging on the window.
Well, at first, the guards, didn't know anything. But out the window, I can see you guys, and and there was a can of like hair gel, like like a little tub can, and to signal you so you know what window I'm at, because I know it's very difficult to see up from there. I'd bang on the little tiny window. The window was yay big, like it was a slit of glass. You can't even. It was about the size of this. Yeah. And it's really not comfortable to look out or look in. So I was banging on the thing to get your attention, and I was surprised that you could actually hear it so loudly, because when I saw Freedom Downtime, I could hear it, which was amazing. Yeah. And eventually what happened is the prison guards or the staff realized that there was somebody across the street with a camera filming up at the prison. So then they figured out somehow that it had something to do with me. So as I was signaling to you and waving, and then I just had an intuition at a certain time to go down to where the guard was and just chat with him, and that way he sees I'm right there, so I couldn't have been anywhere else. So coincidentally, within 30 seconds of, within about 5 minutes of chatting, he gets a phone call, and he's talking, he goes, no, he's right here in front of me. So somebody called asking where I was, assuming I was at the window. And then all of a sudden there's like the goon squad came, all these guards, and they locked everybody down in their rooms. But they didn't do it. They asked me about, do you know who's across the street? Do you know what's going on? I go, no. I just acted completely stupid. And that's what I recall.
So how many people were in this prison at the time?
Well, I was on a floor with about 130 other inmates.
Was it the entire prison that got locked down? Just the floor?
From what I know, it was just the entire floor.
How do they know what floor to lock down?
I guess what they saw is, I don't know. They knew because you guys had free Kevin banners. They knew it was probably the floor that I was on, that you guys were protesting or something, and they get very paranoid when somebody's outside filming the prison. Yeah, and it's great you guys were across the street, because when they told you to go away, you just basically go fly a kite.
Well, no, what they did was they told us to come over to them.
Right.
They were standing on their sidewalk. Come over here. We just want to talk to you for a second.
He said, come over here.
I said, no way, we're not going over there. So we stayed by the mobile station.
Because there's nothing they can do when you're on public property.
And we weren't the only people there. Other people were coming and waving at their relatives or whatever, and it's the only place you can visit for many.
Yeah, then what's happened is someone actually took a free Kevin bumper sticker and stuck it on the glass at the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Wasn't us. We didn't do that.
Right. So you get this. So these morons come up to me and barge in the room I was in, and they go, "How did this sticker get up on the window?" I knew. Oh yeah. Well, I snuck out of the prison and put it up and came back. And I go, I don't know. And they, I just played dumb, and they basically went about their business. But I mean, what's the intelligence of these guys that come up to me and ask how did I do it? I broke out, then I decide to put a sticker on and come back up?
How were you treated for the most part in prison, both by the guards and the fellow prisoners?
Well, when I was in detention in MDC, I was treated reasonably well by the prison guards there. They were just doing their job. Some of them decided they had personal issues and would be very petty, but the prisoners, I had a lot of respect because of my intelligence and for what I was in there for, and because of my notoriety. But at the same time, there was a lot of disrespect because I didn't do it for the money. Because they said if they had my skills, they would have been using that to get fat bank accounts. That's what their terminology was. They'd have big bank. That's their lingo in there, and they would have used the skills that I had to steal as much money as potentially possible and go, live in Tahiti.
So from both sides, you lose. People either think that you're doing something of a terroristic nature and you should be locked up for the maximum amount of time, or they don't respect you because you didn't.
Now imagine if I wanted to really hurt this country when I was in prison, to teach these guys the skills and to give them the tools, especially in today's world where hacker tools are, just simply going to the right website.
People who you ordinarily would never associate with.
Right, ordinarily would never associate with. If I had wanted to, which I never had done, I could have given them the intelligence and the know-how, and they could have used those skills, and they certainly would have been ripping off everybody left and right.
Do you really think you could have taught people in that prison to hack on a level that you're?
I could have given them. Yeah, there's a lot of intelligent people there. Yeah, I mean, I don't say at the same level, but at least where they can start and how the vulnerabilities that are out there in some of the systems. I certainly could have given them information, but I never had a desire to.
Did they ever pressure you to do this?
Well, I was approached by a Colombian drug lord that offered me $5 million cash, no questions asked, if I could somehow get him released once I was released from custody. And I had a Nigerian guy who was part of a Nigerian credit card fraud ring that said if I were to give him 100,000 credit cards, he'd give me $1 million cash. Of course, I would never, see, my motive and purpose behind hacking was never to steal. And I consider that like outright theft. And that wasn't what Kevin Mitnick was about. So, of course, I never took any of these guys up on their offers.
Throughout this whole ordeal, a lot of us have been impressed by the support from your family.
Yes, my grandmother, my mom.
It's simply incredible. And I think we should spend a moment just acknowledging that. And also, I'm wondering, how much strength did you actually gain from your relatives on the outside? Who were...
Oh, a tremendous amount. Especially from my mother and grandmother. They were always there behind me. They were very supportive. They'd come up to visit me and they would drive from Las Vegas to Los Angeles like every 3 weeks. And they went through an extreme hardship. Not only did I go through a painful experience, but it was very painful for my mother and grandmother. My dad also, it affected him, and he passed away from lung cancer in July of 2001. And I really missed out on the years that I could have spent, with family like my father. And then as soon as I get out, this medical situation happened, and then he passed away, and I lost all that time with him. So that was a significant, emotional event in my life that there's nothing I can do. It happened, and if I wasn't sent away for 5 years, at least I could have spent more time with my father. And
then the time before that, when you were on the run and weren't able to spend time with them.
Yes, with anybody. And that was the reason I went on the run, was because I was afraid that the government would have hyped me up to be somebody that I really wasn't and punish me like they did before, and I was just scared.
So what do you have planned for the future?
Well, I wrote this book, Art of Deception, which is doing really well. It's all about social engineering, how it's done, and it's kind of like a security awareness training tool. So people and companies could use this and read and learn about the techniques, so they'll be able to recognize, to prevent, detect, and respond to these types of threats. And then I just started defensive thinking with my colleague Alex Casper, and we're doing kind of like what I mentioned earlier. What do you see hackers doing nowadays? Taking their skills and working for the commercial sector. So we're looking at doing security awareness training, vulnerabilities, security assessments, pen testing, and wireless security. So I'm basically taking my knowledge with technical knowledge and people-based knowledge and applying it to help businesses protect themselves against the threats.
Well, best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the inspiration. We're sorry you went through.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's hard to believe this whole thing is over.
Yeah.
I mean, we're sitting here today. I remember, I could reflect back to the time I was arrested on February 15th, 2000. No, yeah, what was it? February 15, 1995. My God.
Yeah.
At 1:30 in the morning, and here it's what you have my watch. It's January 24th, 25th, and of 2003. So it's been a long, almost 8 years of dealing with this, which is, and originally the government wanted to give me a sentence minimum of 8 years. They were trying to put me away for a very long time, claiming that I actually, the federal prosecutors in the case actually wanted me to go through a CIA debriefing when I was arrested in North Carolina under the guise that I infiltrated US government secrets. It's the same thing with Kevin Polson's case. They accused him of having national security information. What they had done is he worked for SRI International. He backed up his computer, put it onto mag tape, stored it in the locker, so when they found him, there was some information there that they classified after they found it on him. They play dirty pool.
Yeah.
And it's a very scary thing. You never want to be, the government is like, it's a machine that never stops, that has unlimited money, and if you ever become a target the federal government, God help you unless you have a lot of money to fight them.
I think those are almost exactly the same words Bernie S. said in our film. And it's amazing to hear that you've both been through such similar situations and you both have the same perspective. And I imagine many, many people also have that perspective who have been through the ringer. And I'm really dreading the amount of people that will go through this in the future. And I hope that we can all be together to fight this and to kind of be a unified front, maybe a resource for people to come to should bad things happen.
Yeah, like I would be there for the next guy and try to help in any way I can. In fact, Omar Figueroa, who's a lawyer, actually represented me pro bono when the state was going to try to prosecute me after the federal government had finished, if you recall that.
Yes.
And he actually called me and said, hey, would you be an expert witness in this case that I'm defending? And I said, sure, I'd do it pro bono, because I don't want somebody else to be subjected to the hype and hyperbole and mistreatment that I had undergone at the hands of overzealous government officials.
So we're all going to be there. We're all going to keep trying to fight this thing and keep people updated in the future.
Yes, great.
All right.
And I want to thank you. Hey, it's been a
Thanks.
pleasure.
All right. Best of luck.
All right.
Congratulations, Kevin!
Congratulations, Kevin!
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Say congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin. Welcome back to the internet. I have a porn site. See me there.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin. I'll be hiding these now.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin. Hey, Kevin, congratulations from your friends and family in Wisconsin.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Hey, congratulations, Kevin!
Congratulations, Kevin. It's been 2 days, so we're waiting.
Does it have a T or a D, congratulations? It sounds like congrat. People say congrat, but you say congratulations like a D. It doesn't always sound like a D, congratulations. It's a G even. How do you say it? Say it.
Congratulations.
You see, it's a G. Congratulations. It's a G. It's not a T or a D. It's a G. C-O-N-G. Adulations. Whatever it's spelled. Congratulations, Kevin. Fucking A.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin!
Sorry, Kevin. I wasted your time and everyone else's who's watched this with a lot of nonsense. But we're all pretty happy that you're not just out, but now you're sort of free to roam and play like all of us have for well, since you've been in jail, pretty much. So welcome to the club. It's great to have you. Continued success and more of that kind of stuff.
Congratulations, Kevin. Good job.
Kevin, dear, the world is yours. The day has finally come. Congratulations, honey.
Congratulations, Kevin. Welcome back.
May the force be with you.
Congratulations, Kevin.
Yeah, that's good. What she just did, we get everybody to say, congratulations, Kevin, it's sort of a collage at the end. Congratulations, Kevin, Steve Wozniak, President Bush, the Pope, and in the end, we just go out, and this is good to include for the DVD blooper, that we're actually thinking of this right now. At the very end, we just end with congratulations, Kevin, on the screen, fade to black. Who knows how to make a film?